Hey everyone, and welcome to the Stitch Sessions. We're coming to you from my favorite happy place for this episode, and we're going to talk all about how the crochet series for 2021 is going to be all about life at the beach. So once the holidays are over and Christmas is done and there's no other foreseeable holidays coming up, what I start thinking about in January is my happy place. And my happy place is here in Sauble Beach, Ontario. And this beach lies on the eastern shores of Lake Huron. And it is definitely one of my favorite places. And we come here in the summer. So in January, my friends and I, we already start planning our beach getaway. And we just love it here. And I can sit on the beach and do some crochet and enjoy the water. I'm here first thing in the morning today, and you can just hear the sounds of the waters lapping on the shores. It's just gorgeous. And of course, one of the things that makes Sauble Beach such a popular destination is its world famous beautiful sunsets. One of my favorite things about this beach is its expansive shores. Did you know that this is the second longest beach in all of the province? It runs for a stretch of 11 kilometers or 7 miles. And especially early in the morning, I love taking really quiet, long walks along the shores here. And much like crochet, it's just something that I find so meditative and so peaceful, and it helps me to clear my mind. And that's definitely one of the number one things I love about this beach. And as you can see, I'm wearing my Sombrero Sun top, and this is the project we're going to talk about in this month's series of Life's a Beach Crochet. So let's grab all of our materials and I'll meet you in the craft room. Okay guys, are you ready? I can't wait to dive into this ball of yarn. So for this project, I'm using my favorite summertime yarn since last year. The Summer Nights by Lion brand yarn. It is just lovely, and they came up with this new colorway this year. And this one is called Flamingo. Now it is a finer yarn, so for those of you that don't have a lot of patience, you should get some because this is so fun to work with. Now in this ball, it comes in a 200-gram ball, which will be plenty for your top, and which gives you 800 meters or 875 yards. So you get a lot of yardage in this. It is machine wash and dry, which is so perfect for a summer project. And it's 82% acrylic and 18% polyester. Okay, so that is the yarn that we are using. You always want to make sure you have a trusty pair of scissors on hand and a darning needle for sewing in your ends later on. Now, this is a super fine weight 1 yarn, and they are recommending a 3.5 millimeter crochet hook. But for this project, I'm using a 3.75 millimeter crochet hook, also known as an F or size 5. And I just wanted to go up a wee bit just to kind of give the stitches a little bit more of a loose, relaxed look. Okay, so here we go. One thing I forgot to mention, guys, is you definitely want to have a measuring tape on hand because anytime you work on a garment that is customizable, you want to make sure that you've got your measuring tape and a trusty piece of paper and a pen for writing things down. So on that note, I'm just going to, before we get started, is just kind of bring out my trusty, beautiful drawing here. As many of you know, I am absolutely not an artist, but this is just kind of the basic structure of how we're planning this top. Now, of course, I did not draw this in proportion at all. Apparently, this is a football player who's going to be wearing this top because I made the shoulders really bulky. So it hopefully will not look like this on you guys. So we are going to start this top from the top and work our way down. So what we want to do here is we're going to begin with the yoke of the blouse. And as you notice, it's not like a traditional V or a close to the neckline. We're going to do more of an oval set shape, and it should almost feel like it's going to be an off the shoulder top, but it just sits just close to the edges of the top. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start by creating the first round that will be the base of that yoke. Okay, so that's where we're starting with that. Okay guys, so we're going to begin this project with a slip knot, and then you're going to chain 3, and you just want to not chain too tightly. This is already really fine yarn, and you just don't want to make it too difficult to find your stitches or to insert your hook. So once you've chained 3, you're going to find the third chain from the hook. Remember, we don't count the one on your hook, and we're going to double crochet into that first chain you created. Okay, so you pull through 2, whoops, and then you pull through 2. Okay, so this looks like a little V that we've created here. Okay, now what you're going to do, that's our first loop, and I'll explain to that in a second. So we're going to chain 3 again, 1, 2, and 3. Then you're going to turn that V, you're going to yarn over and into that space, that loop that we created, which might be tricky to see the first time. Remember, that's our first chain, so be careful because that's stretched out. We don't want to mistake that. This is the space here. We're going to insert our hook there and double crochet. Okay, so now we've created a loop on top of another loop. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, then we're going to chain 3 again, 1, 2, and 3. You're going to turn your work and repeat it. You're going to double crochet into the loop space. Okay, so you double crochet. So what this does is your loops keep building one on top of the other. Okay, again, chain 3, turn your work. See, now that you're building it up, it should become a little easier to find those loop spaces, and double crochet into that space. Okay, just like that. Okay, so it's creating like a little extra chain effect. This is what you want to do until you get the desired length that you need or would like. So remember when I brought out my beautiful piece of artwork here? What we're doing with these loops is we're creating this first round here, and that's going to be the neck opening. Okay, so as I explained before, I want mine to sit right just before it hits the edge of the shoulders. It's going to give that illusion that it's almost like an off the shoulder top without being off the shoulder. Now, if you would like yours cinched in a little bit snugly or a little bit more narrow, then you're going to chain a smaller length. So that's why I'm not going to give specific numbers. I'll tell you what mine are. My size is usually a medium to a large, depending on the style of the top. Okay, so once I've reached my desired length, I'll let you know how many I have done. So just go ahead and do that. And then when you've reached your desired length, I'm going to meet back up with you and we're going to talk about how we're going to close this off, and then we can work on the rest of the top. Okay guys, so I've done the length that is perfect for me. So I have a total of 92 loops. And I'm just going to pull these apart here so you can see. And I have a measurement of 25 inches in total for the whole length. And so that means when it's folded in half, which is what we're going to do shortly, we're going to attach this to work it in a ring fashion. This will give me about 12.5 inches in width here. Now keep in mind, see, it's fairly stretchy. So if you're worried about it becoming too wide, I would maybe take off a few loops because it will stretch a little bit. And my apologies to those that are on metric, 25 inches is going to be about 64 centimeters. and 12.5 inches is going to be about 32 centimeters. So let's take you on to the next row. So we're still going to work in a row or in row-like fashion just before we close this off. And then we're going to work in the round after that. Okay? So once you have the number of loops that you are happy with, what we want to do is we're now going to work back along these chain loops. Okay? So what we're going to do is you're going to chain 1, then you're going to insert your hook back into the chain space. And what we're going to do is we are going to do 2 single crochets. Just like that. And then you're going to slip stitch back into that same space. Okay? Might be hard to see what all this is about because it's so small, but so far you're going to have something that looks like that. Looks like a little rosebud, little bud of some kind. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to go into the very next loop and you will slip stitch into the next loop. And then chain 1. Okay, so now you're working out of the next loop. We'll now proceed to do 2 single crochets. 1 and 2. And then we'll slip stitch back into that same space. So hopefully now you can see where we're going with this. So it's just creating this really pretty little arched effect inside each loop. Okay, and that's what we're going to keep doing all the way back down. So now I'm going to go into the next space and I slip stitch into the space. Whoops. And then I chain 1 and single crochet 2 times, once and twice. And then I slip stitch to end that little arch. There we go. Now you can see that a little bit better. Okay. So again, into the next space, you slip stitch in and you slip stitch out of each space. So you slip stitch in, chain 1, and then back into that same space, you're going to single crochet once, twice, and slip stitch when you're done. Okay, whoops, let me just stretch that. So you're getting this really cute little ripple or ruffle effect, or arched effect is more like it. So that's all you're going to do until you get to the very end. Again, slip stitch, chain 1, 2 single crochets, slip stitch. Slip stitch, chain 1, 2 single crochets, slip stitch, and on and on and on, all the way until you get to the end of your loop chain. Okay, and then I'm going to meet you back up here, and then we're finally going to join and start to work our project in the round. Just love how this color is coming out. Okay, I'll meet you back here shortly. Okay, so I have done all 92 of my loops. Okay, so I have now come to my 92nd loop. So my work is looking something like this. It's just creating these pretty little kind of ridged edging there. So this is going to be the inside of our collar. So now what we're going to do is we're going to attach this to the beginning to create a circle. And from here on out, we're going to be working in the round. So just want to pull that up there. Okay, so that's where my last slip stitch went in 2, and you can see this is where I began. Now what you want to do is you just want to make sure it's not twisted and just find the end there, keeping it nice and flat. And then we are going to join to the beginning. Okay, so that's our first loop there. So what we're going to do is we are going to slip stitch to join. So we're going to insert our hook, and so I'm just making sure that the chain loops are facing each other because that's the inside of the circle. And then I'm just going to slip stitch to join here. Just like that. Okay, so the little ridges are on the outside of our circle. And again, just pull it out, and you might want to stretch it out, make sure it's not twisted. In a moment, we're going to talk about using our stitch markers, because these 2 points now it's going to sit over. So you've got this circle. So if I did this like this, these 2 ends here will sit around your shoulder area. Now we will be doing a few little increases as we work. You may want to put a stitch marker on each end, but I'm not going to do it just yet because I'm going to wait until I do the first round here just to kind of get things established. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to work on the inside of these loops here. Okay, so those right there. So I've just slip stitched to join. Make sure not to confuse my tail. And now what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to turn my work this way. And what that does is that allows me to keep the right side facing towards me. So these little shells here, I do want them facing upward as I'm working. So now when I work in the round, the right side will face me. Okay, so then I'm going to do that, and basically I will slip stitch back into that first loop that I came from. Okay, so your shells should be facing down. And again, this at this point too, because you just went back, make sure that you pull it out and just make sure that your circle doesn't have a twist in it, because if you get into row 4 or 6 or 10 and realize that your top is twisted, you're going to have an issue. And unfortunately, you will have to frog it, which won't be fun. So just give it a quick little boo here, make sure. Okay, so it is not twisted. Now, before I go back and slip stitch again into the top, because we want to be working into this round, what I'm going to do is I'm going to snake my yarn through here. So that will turn my work right side up. And if it doesn't make any sense to you, you will quickly figure that out when you try to slip stitch, and it's going to be twisted. So now my yarn is coming out here, which will work out perfectly. And now see my little mini shells? They're now going to be on the bottom of my work. And I will proceed to now slip stitch back into this first loop. And I'm ready to rock and roll. Okay. And if you want to, and I would recommend this, if you're still a little bit newer crocheter, I would take this tail here and I would actually come in and sew these 2 shells kind of one next to each other. This will definitely prevent it from twisting. Okay. And in fact, that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to take this little short tail. And what I'm going to do, hopefully you can see that okay on camera, is I'm just going to come up in this little mini shell here, and I'm going to connect it to this little shell here. And I'm just going in anywhere. I mean, this is going to be the back of my top. It's going to be ever so unnoticeable. Just like that. And I might do it a couple of times just to secure it. And I'll go into the center of the shell, and there we go. So I feel much more secure about that. So see, all the empty loops, or the tops of the loops, now sit on top, whereas the shells will now be on the bottom. Okay, and you can put a little knot in that if you like. Okay, here we go. All right, so now we're beginning the top ridge of our sombrero top. And what I love about customizable projects like this is I'm going to give you the number of rows to do this in, but you will adjust this to however the top fits on you and however you like it to sit. Okay, so this is going to be the pattern for the first few rows. I'm going to do this for a total of anywhere from 4 to 6 rows. Okay, so you can gauge it on how you look at how you like it to sit on you. So we're going to chain 1, and we're going to single crochet into that loop. We're then going to chain 3, and then we're going to single crochet into the next loop. Okay, so you're creating a little loop like that. Then you're going to chain 3 again. You're going to go into the next loop, and you're going to single crochet. Okay, and that's basically your pattern for row 1 of your official collar. And again, chain 3 and single crochet into the loop there. Okay, so it's just creating a few more loops. That's all you're going to do until you come back to the beginning here. And then we'll talk about inserting our stitch markers. So go ahead and do that all the way around for your first row here, your first round. I'll meet up with you shortly. Okay, scrap that last bit about the increases. Okay, I'm just coming up to my last couple of loops here, so I'm single crocheting, and I've got one more loop here, so I'm going to chain 3, and then I'm going to single crochet into that last loop. And so it should bring us back to the beginning. There's our short tail, which secured our shells to the bottom. And now here's the very first loop we created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain 3 again, because I'm coming out of this loop. And I'm just going to slip stitch into the top of that single crochet that we did at the very beginning. And you have completed row 1. There we go. Now it's obviously it's very fine yarn, so you're just gonna have to pull it apart a little bit so it'll look like that. So now your little mini shells will always sit on the bottom of your work because we're working from the top down. Now you can see these little kind of a mesh type stitch, and that's what we're going to be doing from here on out. So for the next 3 rounds, you're just going to simply do the same thing again. So once you've slip stitched to join here, you're going to chain 3, and then you are going to single crochet into that first loop. Okay, and you're going to proceed to do the same thing as you just did, chain 3, and then go into the next loop. Okay, and continue on from there. When you come to the end here, what we want to try and do is slip stitch into the first chain there. And what that does is it helps to keep where our seam will be relatively in the same spot. Now, at the end of the day, if it's tricky for you to see because this is also variegated, just slip stitch into the very first loop, chain your 3, and then continue on as usual. Where your join will be will move, but because this is a variegated yarn, it's not really going to matter, okay? So for now, I know for me, I'm going to keep what will be the back of my top, where my little tail is, to the back. So I'll know that this is the back for now. But the beautiful thing about working with variegated fine yarn is it's all going to get hidden. Isn't that nice? Okay, so go ahead and do that for another 3 rounds, and I'll meet back up with you when you've done that. Okay, once you've done your 4 rounds, your work will look something like this. So they're quite snug. They're not too loose. So you'll basically have like a stretchy band. And then, of course, now you can see a little bit more prominently the mini shells we have going here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work the main body of the top, which is going to go from basically this collar area down to around just above where your elbow bend is. And that part is the part that's going to have the flare out. So you'll notice that I've got a couple of pins here, stitch markers. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay your work down so that it's sitting flat. And so I have put my stitch markers here because I would like where my short tail is to actually be my back seam. I don't want it to sit on the sides where my shoulders are going to be. So how did I find that spot? Well, you can count. For me, I have 92 loops. So I would divide that by 4, which for me is going to be 23. And I would count 23 loops over this way and 23 loops over that way. And then I know that this is folded in half and that seam is relatively in the middle. Now, if you can't be bothered to count, which I know some of you have told me you don't like to count. So here's a super easy way to figure it out. Where my seam is, where my tail is, sorry, I just have this yarn here. I just take it from there and I fold it so that it is sitting flat. So I know definitely that's the center and it's sitting nice and flat. Here's my other center. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to proceed to fold it in half again, whoops, from there. And that should give you the middle bend here. And obviously I have moved this for some strange reason. So that one is correct, okay? And then you just make sure that the other one corresponds. And that's it. So it's pretty easy. And now you know when you fold this on either end that your seam is going to be to the back of your work. So if you're one loop off here and there, it's not going to be a big deal. But you want to put those stitch markers in there because that's where we're going to increase for our round, okay? So let's begin with the pattern of our sombrero part of the top. Okay, so I've slip stitched to join that last round of the mesh stitch. And now we're going to do a pattern or a stitch pattern that some of you may know as the shells and post stitch. So I am starting inside a loop here. So I'm just going to chain 3 to get the height that I need. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place 2 more double crochets inside this space here. So I'm just going to go inside that loop and do 2 double crochets back into that space. And so we've just done a little shell here. The chain 3 will count as a double crochet, okay? Now we are doing split shells or split fans. So we are going to chain 1 and do 3 more double crochets back into that loop. Okay. So you just yarn over as you normally would do, working into that space. And we're going to do one more. So you have something that looks like that. Okay, so there's the little split in the center. And now what you're going to do is you're going to go into the next loop and you're just going to place 1 double crochet. Then you'll move into the next loop and we're going to place a split shell. So that means we're going to place 3 double crochets. There's our second one and our third one. And then we have to chain 1 to create that split, and then 3 more double crochets, which you might know as a shell stitch if you've done any work on granny motifs. Okay, so your work looks something like this. So it creates a nice lacy effect. And that's what you're going to do until we get to that first stitch marker, okay? So you're going to do a split shell, a single posted, I call it a single post, 1 double crochet, and then another split shell. So in the next loop, what would we do? We would do a double crochet. So you have 1, and then in the next loop, you're going to have that 3, chain 1, 3. Okay, so split shell, double crochet, split shell, double crochet, split shell. Alternate until you get to that first stitch marker, and then I'm going to tell you what we're going to do there. Okay, so I've come to my first stitch marker. So your work is looking a little something like this. So my yarn is variegated, so it's changing in colors, but it's creating this really pretty little flared shell effect. Okay, so what we want to do in this stitch marker is we want to increase the motifs that we're doing. So we've just, in my case, I've just come to a split shell. So the next one would normally be a single post or a single crochet, double crochet on its own. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to place that single or that individual double crochet into that space. I'm going to chain 1 and do another double crochet into that space. And then I'm going to chain 1 again and do it 1 more time into that same space. So what that does is it's created an extra space for our next round when we come back to this, so that you will have space to place a split shell and a post with another split shell. Whoops. So post, split shell, post. Oops, I need to do 1 more. So we're going to chain 1 more time, and back into that same space we're going to do a double crochet. Okay, so we've created kind of a very wide shell stitch. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's a double crochet with a chain, a double crochet with a chain, a double crochet with a chain, and a double crochet. So we've created 3 spaces here. So when we come back around and do the next row, after we've done a split shell in here, we will go into the first space and do a double crochet. The middle space will get a split shell, and the side space will get a double crochet. So this is how you will increase kind of the number of stitches as well as the flared out effect that we want on the shoulders, okay? So that's what you're gonna do in your stitch marker. Now, if you so happen to come to the stitch marker and maybe you had just finished doing a post, unlike myself, I had just finished doing a shell. So I needed to do this, what I'm calling a post. It's just a double crochet. So I needed to increase the amount of spaces here. So I have the double crochet chain one, double crochet chain one, so that I have 4 double crochets in here. If the one before your stitch marker ends up just being a post, what you're going to do in your stitch marker point or loop is you would do a shell, a split shell. You would then chain 1, do a post, chain 1, and do another split shell into the same loop. The best scenario, I think, will be this one, where you've got a spread out shell, just to kind of, it gives a little flare, but not too much. That's the thing sometimes when we're only increasing in 2 sides, you do run the risk of flaring out too much. But because of the way this drapes, I'm not too worried about it. But if you're following me with the 92 loops, yours will end up just like mine, okay? And I'm just pulling this apart because I hope you guys can see that okay there, okay? So that creates 3 spaces in there. Now I'm just going to, and in fact, what I'll do is I'll move this stitch marker. So when I come to the next round, I'll remember it's there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it in the center space. So see, there's the first space. This is the center space, and that's the other one. So I'm just going to place it there. So when I come around for round 6, then I'll know that that's the center. And from here on out, I am just going to continue on. I'm going to go into the next space and do a split shell, which is the 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets. And then the rest of this round will be exactly like this. So I'm going to chain 1 and then place 3 back in there. And I've got 1 more. Okay, so you can see it's bunching, and that's okay because we want it to flare out. And then the next one just has 1 double crochet. So we go back to our regular pattern, okay? When you come to your next one, you're going to do that increase the same way we did before. Then you continue on with the regular repeat till you get to the end of round 5, okay? So I will meet you up here when you've gotten to the end of your round. Okay guys, now because I had an even number of loops, this ended up perfectly for me. So I ended up with a split shell, and then in the very last loop, whoops, which is right there where we initially started our round, I'm going to place the post or 1 double crochet. And then I can slip stitch at the top of that chain 3. Okay. Now, if you ended up with an odd number of loops, you would just adjust that accordingly. So maybe I would do 1 post and 1 post, 1 in each loop, just so that it doesn't bunch up. But if you can work it so that you have an even number of loops, it just will make your life easier. So I've slip stitched to join. This was row 5 of the body. And now I have something that looks like this. So you can see it's kind of rippling a little bit. It's already starting to give a little bit of a flare. I just love how that faint hint of sparkle is being picked up. So where we had the stitch marker, if I stretch this out a little bit here and I lay it flat, see? You can see it's bowing out, which is what we want, because remember, this is going to sit on you just around the top of your shoulders. So we want to have a little bit of give so that when you lift your arms up, there is a little bit of a flare here. So we've got that on that side. And then see, when I lay it flat, it wants to kind of flare up. So that's perfect. Okay, so now the subsequent rounds will be a little bit easier. We're now going to be working posts over posts and shells into shells, okay? So we've just slip stitched to join here, and what we're gonna do is we're just going to slip stitch over, nice and easy, to where the split is in the shell, okay? And I like doing that just because it makes it a lot easier to work into. So now we're just going to work split shells into split shells and posts into posts. So we're going to, since we slip stitched here, we're going to chain 3. This will count as one of our posts, okay? And now we're going to simply do a split shell in the split portion of the shell. So you'll yarn over and do what we've done before. You're going to do 3 double crochets. And there's the third one. You will chain 1 and do 3 double crochets again into that same space. So we have 2 and we have 3. Okay, and that's why they call it a split shell, because it's split in the center. So all of your shells will be inside of each other. And then you're going to come to your double crochet on its own. Now, because this is called shells and posts, normally you would work a front post stitch like that. And that just kind of gives it a neat little texture. I actually want the post to just sit nice and subtly in here, so I am not going to do a front post. You can certainly do that if you like, not a problem. But for this project, I'm just going to work a double crochet into a double crochet. So I'm just going to go into the actual stitch, and I'm going to double crochet as usual. Okay, just like that. And then I would move over into the next split shell, and I would do a split shell. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward now that we've done that established kind of beginning of the rows, so to speak, of the body. They're much easier to find where we're going to place our stitches. Okay, so I'm going to leave you to do this shell into shell, post over post, and I am going to meet up with you once we come back to that stitch marker. Maybe remember that one where we had kind of a lacy shell there with all the posts? I'm going to meet back up with you when you get there just to guide you through that. Okay, I've just worked my last split shell into a split shell. And next is where my stitch marker is. And this is where I have the double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, chain 1, etc. So in that first chain 1 space here, it looks like my yarn is splitting, I am going to put my post, okay, because I just finished doing a shell. So I'm going to go into that space and do a post. And where the actual stitch marker is, which is in the middle space there, I'm going to take that out, I am going to place my shell. And so what that's doing is it's going to increase the number of stitches we have on this side, which will give us a little bit more of a flare to go around our shoulders. Then we'll chain 1 and 3 more double crochets. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. So in the first space here, I know it's variegated, so it's going to be a little tricky. In the first space of this lacy shell, we did our post. In the next space, we do our split shell, and then we have one more space here, right there, where we're going to do another post. Okay, so we're going to just go right in between there. So we've added an extra shell and an extra post in that area. So you can see it's starting to waver a little bit, and that'll be good because it's going to drape over our shoulder nicely. And that's it. And then we continue on. It's a split shell next, which is great because we just did a post. It's a split shell there. And you continue on as usual. Now, this is the only place for now that I plan on doing this increase. So you can get rid of your stitch marker if you like, but if you need a point of reference later, like maybe you might need to increase again, I would just leave that stitch marker back in there, and it just helps you gauge where your sides are. I am pretty happy with the amount of flare now that's going on here. Okay, so see, now it's really bowing out. And for me, that's plenty, because then as we get the length, then it's going to have this nice kind of wavy look. So I'm super happy with that. Now, the thing with garments, you need to customize them to yourself. So you can follow the size that I'm doing, and I'm doing this top more on the billowy side. So I would say it would fit, like I'm on average a medium. It might fit a medium to maybe a large, because I am making it a bit billowy. But keep that in mind. I recommend, as you do a few rows, try it on again. And if you find that you're not able to lift your arms, because we want it to be able to flare out so that it's got this beautiful fanned out sleeve, you need to be able to do that. So if you maybe after 3 more rows you try it on and you can see it's starting to tighten around your shoulders, you definitely need more increases here, okay? I don't feel I will need increases. So that is the only time I'm going to increase, and then it will drape over. So you have to do you. Always keep that in mind. These designs, of course, are always a guide in the general structure of it. Okay, so that's how you're going to work your shells and posts into the increase. I am going to keep the stitch marker there as a reference because you just never know. And now you are just going to keep doing this pattern for rounds and rounds and rounds. And I'm going to do it until I reach the bend in my elbow, because that's where I want kind of the sleeve, the flap of the sleeve to sit. And then once we get there, we're going to talk about then creating the actual openings for your arms, and then the waist portion of the top. So for now, you've got a little bit of work ahead of you. Maybe put on your favorite Netflix show, and you are off to the races. And the beautiful thing is that you don't have to count. Everything is set up for you. You know you're going to place a shell inside of a shell and a post on top of a post. So off you go, and I will meet you back here shortly.